Hi, my name is Adele Hagney. I'm the reference librarian for the St. Louis Public Library in the St. Louis Room. So I'm the local history specialist for St. Louis Public Library, and I'm here today to give you a quick overview of the St. Louis Room, a quick tour of our local history department. The St. Louis Room's origins go back to the Municipal Reference Library, which opened in City Hall in 1911. The library was established by City Hall, but run by the St. Louis Public Library, and it served the people who worked in City Hall, Board of Aldermen, the mayor, and everybody else. And the wonderful thing about the Municipal Reference Library was that it was able to collect things like all of the ordinances, city documents, annual reports, a really rich collection of local history reference sources. That was in operation until 1981, when budget constraints allowed for its closing. The collection from the Municipal Reference Library went back to Central. And in 1991, Central Library opened the St. Louis Information Center, which was information about city resources in our government documents department. And in the history and genealogy department, we opened the St. Louis Area Studies Center, which was local history based. Those two departments combined when we remodeled Central and are now the St. Louis Room, which is on the third floor of Central Library. We opened in December of 2012, a lot more space. We got to go into the stacks and pull a whole bunch of stuff that hadn't been available to the public before, but now is available. So what's in the St. Louis Room? People always ask us, and we inevitably say things about St. Louis. It seems obvious, but there it is. One of the wonderful things that we got that you can see here is we got the last remaining card catalog, huge original card catalog. This piece of furniture was in the building when we opened in 1912. And it's the last fully extant card catalog that we have. What it is now is local history reference sources, any little bits of information, a reference to something that's on the shelf, just a fun factoid written on a card, anything is fair game. We use this every day. So, but what other things do we have in the St. Louis Room? We still have things that were from the Municipal Reference Library. We have city ordinances, as you can see here, going back to the founding of the city in 1821. Town was earlier, city is 1821. We have annual reports from various and sundry city departments like the Health Division, which seems really dry, but is in fact a really, really rich source of information. One of our more popular items that we have been able to pull out from the stacks are the high school yearbooks. We have yearbooks from most of the city high schools, a couple of the universities. We are still accepting donations of high school yearbooks. That's how we're able to get more things from the county and from some of the private schools. If you're interested in donating a high school yearbook, you can call us and we'll let you know if we have it and if we need some. We have a wonderful map collection in our department going back to the 17th century. Wonderful maps of St. Louis, of Missouri, of St. Louis County. The map on the left here I love because it still shows Bloody Island, which was an island in the Mississippi between Missouri and Illinois, famous for a good place to fight duels, but that's another story. I'll tell you that later sometime. And this is a ward map from 1882. Great collection of maps, very helpful for family history, business history, that sort of thing. Speaking of business and family and house history, we have some great resources for that. We have an extensive newspaper clipping collection going back to about 1912. There are about 36,000 newspaper clipping files. Wonderful, wonderful resource. Not all of the newspapers that were available have been scanned, so you can find things in here that you cannot find online. This shows you some house numbering certificates. The house numbering certificates were put up by the building department. The building and the street department worked together on these. Not every home has a house numbering certificate, but a lot of them in the city do. This is a great resource for doing your house history. Down here on the bottom right, there are business directories. Business directories will have street listings. Street listings can show you what or who is at a particular address at a particular time. Any resource that we can use to find house history or business history is fair game. One of the projects that we're working on now, that we've been working on actually for a couple of years, is identifying photos from the Lemon Streets and Sewers photo collection. This is a collection that the library got a few years ago from the National Museum and Aquarium in Dubuque, Iowa. How do we get something from Dubuque, Iowa, you might imagine? Let me start. I'll show you the first slide because that's a fun one. Dick Lemon was a photographer. Well, he collected old photos. We think that these came from the Streets and Sewers Department. He had collected a lot of these negatives and donated most of his collection to this museum in Iowa. But as they went through it, they found that there were about 3,000 negatives that were all St. Louis based, and they weren't interested in them. So they had the brilliant idea of calling the St. Louis Public Library and spoke with one of our archivists and said, "Do you want this?" And she said, "Oh, heck yeah." So she drove up to Dubuque, Iowa, picked up the negatives, brought them back to St. Louis. We had them digitized, and now we're working on identifying them. So identifying photos is sometimes really easy. Like this shot, for instance. We know where it is, we know what date it is, we know what time the photo was taken. This is the intersection of Vandevenner and Choteau in 1925. It is the east end of what is now the fashionable Grove neighborhood. Commerce Bank is right here. This is a QT gas station. There's a White Castle right there. But at the time, it was quite a bustling neighborhood of a different sort. So this one was pretty easy. This is a great photo. We also have, this is 18th and Market, obviously, August 1925 at 5:24 p.m. This does not look like 18th and Market right now. On the right, you can see this is the canopy from Union Station. This whole section here was a lot of little hotels and restaurants and places that catered to the crowd that was coming into Union Station. This is all gone now. This is all part of the mall. So I'm a sucker for pictures with streetcars. So this shows that there were a lot of streetcars in town back in the day. Some photos have almost nothing on them. This was one, looked at it, went, okay, what could this be? Now, the nice thing is on the photos that we get to use for identification purposes, we can zoom in on this. For the purpose of this, I can't zoom in. But I was able to zoom in, look, you start to look around and say, well, what do I recognize? And if you see here on the left, you notice there's a very distinct building. This is part of St. Louis University. Right there, that little sliver of a building is St. Francis Xavier Church. Oh, okay, so this makes sense. So we are looking north on Grand from Lawton, West Pine and Lawton. Lawton, whoopsie, whoops, sensitive mouse. Lawton is on this side. West Pine was over here, yeah, or vice versa. So you can see right back here was the old Beers Hotel, which burned down. This is the very western edge of the Mill Creek Valley, what was called the Mill Creek Valley, which was torn down in the 1950s. We estimate, so some of these residences were demolished as early as 1924. So we assume that this is an early 1920s photograph looking north on Grand. There we go. Some things have absolutely no information. So you start to look for, what can I do to identify this photograph? I always like to say that I put on my Nancy Drew pumps and I start to look for clues. In this case, we can look up in the old business directories, like I showed you earlier. And the old business directories are business directories and city directories. The city directory, I can look up something like the American Hat Works. Looked up the American Hat Works, and then looked for the Blue Moon Cafe. Going to the commercial directory, I can look at that address and see what else is around it. And here is this is called the Allenson Building. It's at the 5800 block of Delmar, and it is still there, as one of the folks who's seen this before confirmed a couple weeks ago. So knowing approximately when this is, and definitely where this is, we can identify the other businesses that are along this strip. And we'll put in as much information on the record as we can find about the businesses, because somebody may be looking for some of these places. As it turns out, this is the AP Cohen Drug Company. We have the American Hat Works, the Blue Moon Cafe, and if we go further, we could identify other businesses that were there. Some photos, you have absolutely no clue, none. So this is a street, and there's a church, and there's a school, and that's about all we knew when we first looked at it. And it was kind of driving me nuts, because I thought, this has got to be something. I mean, the church should be distinctive, the school should be distinctive. We started thinking about the school. A lot of the schools in St. Louis were designed by William B. Ittner. And there are a lot of people who have written about Ittner schools because they are architecturally famous. So I zoomed in on this school here on the left. And what you can see when you zoom in is there's towers there with stuff on the top that looks like a castle. I don't know from architectural terms, so you're getting a historic, you're getting just one woman's opinion on this. Like, oh, look, it looks like a castle. And this, you can see it's kind of a scallopy thing up at the top. So we've got one thing here with two towers and a scallopy thing. And then down here, you can see there's another part of the building that looks like it's just a straight thing like that. So I looked at some of the articles that we have about Ittner buildings and some of the websites that have things about Ittner buildings. And there's a website called Built St. Louis, and this guy did an extensive dive into Ittner schools and found this. It's the Hempstead School. It's 5872 Minerva. It was around from 1906 to 2004, and it is in fact an Ittner building. And here, this you can see the details better, but this you get the angle. So here's our little center building with those two towers and the little scallopy bits on the top, and there's your pointy one. So there it is. That's the school. And then once you get the school, then look in the old directories. This church was called St. Barbara Catholic Church. Later, it was the St. Augustine Church. Now it is the St. Augustine Church. I think this top tower is gone, but the side towers are still there. And if you look at a Google image of the 5800 block of Minerva, you can see the church is still there. Some of the houses are still there, The facade of the school is still there, but it's not in good shape. But still, we're able to identify that that's what this was. So 5800 block of Minerva. That was a fun one. It was so satisfying, but this took several hours to identify. So sometimes they take work. Moving a little closer to home, this is the southwest corner of 13th and Olive. What's lovely about this is that we know, I figured this is circa 1927. The building shown has a restaurant down here. It's called the Nash Restaurant. There are advertisements pasted on the building that show shows at local theaters. So you can look in old newspapers, see what's playing at the Gaiety and what's playing at the Empress or the Arcadia Ballroom, which are what these posters are for. You can get a better idea of the date of this. The other reason that we know the date is that in 1926, the voters of St. Louis approved a huge bond issue. And this bond issue, among other things, provided the funding to widen Olive Street. The only practical way to widen Olive Street was to demolish the first 100 feet, 40 feet, sorry, the first 40 feet that were on the south side of Olive. So all the buildings 40 feet back on the south side of Olive from 12th up to, I believe, Jefferson were torn down. This building was one of them. So this used to be across from the library, but now it's been torn down and it's a lovely park. But by July of 1927, all these buildings were torn down. So we can estimate between that and between what's on these posters, this is sometime in 1927. This photo I absolutely love. I love the composition of it. I love, you're looking at the northeast corner, mostly, of Forest Park. And it's just a beautiful photo. Right down here, we have Lindell. This is Union there. This is the old Gatesworth Hotel, the Congress and Senate apartment buildings. These buildings are all still there. The Gatesworth is no longer the Gatesworth. I can't remember what it is, something else now. You can see the Chase is here. So we know this is late 20s, early 30s. You know it's got to be early 30s because if we go up here, the other fun thing about this is you can see Kings Highway. Kings Highway goes straight along here to right about this point where all those buildings from the hospitals are, and goes east and then continues straight on this way. So this is before any part of Highway 40 was built. And the first section of Highway 40, originally the Oakland Expressway and then the Red Feather Highway, it had several different names. The first section of that went from Skinker to Kings Highway, was built in 1934. So this is before Highway 40 took anything out of the park. And it's just a lovely example of that. The other fun thing is in here, this lovely swoopy thing right here is the Wabash Railroad. Later, that became the basis for the Metrolink, and the Forest Park Parkway parallels it just south of the railroad tracks. Again, taking another big chunk out of Forest Park, but it's a beautiful photo, I think. I don't think a photo presentation of St. Louis, older St. Louis, is complete without a picture of Sportsman's Park, if you can find one. And darned if we didn't find one. This is North Grand at Dodier. Sportsman's Park is on the left. And it's great because it gave us a date. This is 1931. What we can see here when we zoomed in, the Speedway Publishing is over here on the left. There's a YMCA on the right. There are auto dealerships here on the right as well. There is a wonderful story in, I believe, 1926, when the Cardinals and the Yankees were playing in their first World Series. Babe Ruth hit a home run out of Sportsman's Park, and it crashed through the windows of one of these auto dealerships. It was a Chevy dealership. So he hits a home run over the, I guess that's going to be the right field wall. I'm not sure. I'm not sure the orientation of Sportsman's Park. In any event, he hits it out. It goes across Grand into one of the windows of the Chevy dealer, and the Chevy dealer gave him, it landed on a car, and the Chevy dealer gave him the car. True story. I am not kidding. Some photos we have not yet identified. At this point, we've identified about 1,400 of the 3,000 photos that we have. Some we'll be able to identify, some we never will. But this is one we haven't yet identified. I love this. It's a beautiful city scene. It really gives you a sense of what the near downtown area was like. We can see, it might be hard to see in this, but we can definitely see it in our working copy of this photo, that this is the National Laundry. We'll have to look up where this is. We've got some small cafes here. We'll zoom in, see anything at all that we can find on this. Again, it's probably late 20s, early 30s, given the kinds of cars, given the dress, the coat on this young girl. My favorite part of this photo is this little boy who is peeking out of what I'm going to guess is a box in which he's selling newspapers. He's probably one of the young newsboys. There were loads of newsboys around town who sold papers. And so I initially thought he was coming out of one of these little storage, you know, the access to the storage area under a cafe or something. But looking closer, he's actually in a box, and he's probably a newspaper boy. But I love that he's peeking out, looking at the camera. That was a detail that I hadn't seen when I first looked at the photo, but you can definitely see it now. Moving on, this is there used to be double-decker buses in St. Louis. Who knew? And what fun would that have been? This particular one was the auto bus service. It was part of the Parks and Recreation Department. It ran from 1916 to 1933, and it just did loops of Forest Park. It cost a nickel and stopped at all of the major sites in Forest Park. And clearly, if this photo is anything to go by, it was pretty popular. Parks Department budget was cut to the bone in the 1930s, so this was one of the things that had to go. If you have any further questions about any of this stuff or anything that I've talked about today, you can contact us. Again, my name is Adele Hagney. I'm the reference librarian in the St. Louis room for the St. Louis Public Library, who is the map specialist and also knows a whole lot more about the city documents. And I are available at this number. That's my email, his email, and if you'd like to see more of the Lemon Streets and Sewers collection, you can go to our website. You can either click on this or go to the website, go to Browse Digital Collections, and that's one of the things that shows up. The maps, there's some maps that we have that are digitized. Those are on there as well. And for a little more information about what's in our special collections departments, go to special collections on our website. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you've learned a couple of things today. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and we hope to hear from you at the library.